All right, what's up, everyone? Kevin Leslie, and welcome back to another solo edition of the At the Thousand podcast. And today we're talking about recruiting, college recruiting, my 5 tips for starting the college recruiting process. And this is a conversation where, especially this time of year, one of the most common questions I'm getting from athletes, but more specifically, athletes' parents, right? The current sophomores who will be entering their junior year, right? They're going to be a rising junior this summer. And a lot of the conversations around kicking off the recruiting process. How do I start to plan? How do I have, getting everything figured out prior to this upcoming summer? So again, this is a very common conversation that I'm having with athletes at this time and parents at this time. And one of the things I wanted to just provide everyone is just, hey, what are some actionable things that you can start to do today to feel more prepared come this upcoming summer, right? When those conversations or thinking about the 4 years beyond high school rowing, right? Those 4 years of college, starting to think about, okay, where does rowing fit into that path? So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. But before we get to that, right? Before we get to my real actionable tips that athletes and parents can start to take or implement now, I want to talk about a couple of precursors and considerations to think about, because this is one of my favorite conversations, because I think in many ways we actually make the process a little bit harder than it needs to be. And what I mean by that is, when we are at this stage, right, when we are a sophomore in high school, I mean, I'm going to speak more specifically towards them. I know there's other, juniors who are still starting to navigate the process and all these different things, right? But we'll keep the focus more on sophomores because they're the ones who are just entering these conversations. When you're a sophomore, oftentimes we start to think about college rowing and we start to feel like we are behind. We start to feel like we don't have it. We are so far behind our teammates, our friends, the conversations at the race course are about college rowing and what schools we're planning on visiting this summer. And a lot of people kind of feel overwhelmed by it. And one of the biggest things I always say is, hey, as a sophomore, your main focus, and again, parents as well, as they are kind of talking to their younger or their kids, your main focus as a sophomore is continuing to develop that passion for rowing, that passion for this sport. You are currently in your first real spring season. Your freshman year doesn't count, right? You're overwhelmed. Everything's brand new. Sophomore year is your first real spring season. And you still have big races coming up. You still have opportunities to race and compete with your teammates. Make that your focus. Continue to fall in love with the sport, because that's what you're going to need. That's the number one requirement you're going to need to be actually successful when you do go off to row in college. If you start putting the cart before the horse and only thinking about what's to come, it's going to impact your ability to truly enjoy why you do the sport in the first place. And that's going to have downstream issues long term if all you're thinking about is the end destination. So for sophomores, don't take this time for granted as you enter these bigger races, as you look to maximize the upcoming championship racing, all these different things. Take ownership of that. Enjoy it, right? And parents as well, enjoy being a part of all this stuff. So that's the one thing. The other precursor, right? That's one precursor, right? Developing the passion. The other precursor is, and I say this a lot, and it's very direct, but get better at rowing as a sophomore. Don't think about college rowing. Get better at high school rowing. And what I mean by that is focusing on quality, focusing on technique, focusing on developing an appreciation for training and the work that is required to be successful as a high school rower, because those are the things you're going to need if you do decide to go on and row at the college level. Because every college coach, even the ones that, or all the ones that have been on here on the podcast talking about their teams and their programs, they all emphasize the fact that you got to be passionate about sport, and you also have to have an appreciation for training, right? For Yes, the erg, right? The getting faster, quality of your strokes, technique, chasing PRs, enjoying all the hard work that is required, because it's only double, if not triple, once you do go off and you row for a competitive college program. So those are my two precursors: develop passion, or continue to develop the passion, and then getting better at rowing. Because one of the things I'm very adamant on, and a lot of coaches have echoed those same thoughts or the same beliefs. If you want to row in college, there is a program out there for you. The question is, at what level? Is it the school that you really want to go to? Is it the competitiveness that you want to go to? But at the bare bones, if you want to row in college, especially right when you consider D1, D2, D3 club programs, there will be a program for you. The next layer to that is deciding, okay, what's the college rowing landscape look like? So make that your priority, right? Make the priority continuing to get better and continuing to fall in love with the sport, because those are things you're going to need regardless of where you go to school. Next phase, before we get into my 5 tips, considerations to think about. Number one, the, I guess, quote unquote, official start date for college recruiting is June 15th, entering your junior year. June 15th. So a little bit less than 2 months from now. So that's when college coaches college coaches can begin to make two-way communication with high school athletes. So the reason I start with that is for the athletes and parents who feel like they have to have everything figured out today, the actual timeline for college recruiting doesn't even start for another 6-7 weeks. So take a step back and don't feel like you have to have everything figured out, because they literally can't talk to you for another 2 weeks or another 2 months. So any email that you send, any communication, any outreach is going to fall on deaf ears for now, right? They're going to put it in some folder in their inbox and circle back around to it maybe in June, probably in September, right? So start to think about it like that. So the other piece of that, for many of you who tuned into the podcast I did last week with Coach Delaney, many-time guest, one of my favorite coaches, one of my good friends, Division I college coach, recruiting coordinator. She kind of described this in terms of the timeline. And again, Division I college rowing recruiting coordinator, right? She's been in the game for a very long time. And she kind of she emphasized the fact that right now, in this summer, most coaches or in this upcoming summer, most coaches are still going to be concerned with the class of 2026, right? Those rising seniors, let alone the class of 2027, the rising juniors, right? The current sophomores. So the reason I say that is, even if you have everything figured out by mid-June, there's still a large possibility that most coaches aren't really turning their attention to those current juniors in the summer, right? Most of them are still trying to fill out the class of income or rising seniors, right? They're still trying to finalize those classes, which will really start to come together mid-fall, right? And Coach Delaney said this, and I think a lot of coaches kind of fall along the same timeline, but it's really head of the Charles fall racing when coaches are starting to finalize the current class, right, or the class for the following fall, and starting to focus on those juniors and starting to kind of read through those emails from the summer and all these different things. Again, there's exceptions, right? There's going to be standout athletes that every coach is reaching out to right from day one. But for 95, 99% of you, that timeline is going to be probably, hey, starting to really have things figured out by fall rather than June 15th of this summer. And so what I mean by that is the process is going to be longer than you think. I think that's what I'm really trying to get at. The process is going to be longer than you think. And a couple of my favorite examples of this are, I have so many athletes who I've worked with in the past who are current junior, they're that sophomore entering junior summer, and they feel like they have to have everything figured out. They have the 20 school list. They have every contact or all the contact information for every coach. They're stressing out about who they're going to be visiting, what college coaches, what their friends have been doing. Their parents are talking about, hey, we have to have everything figured out, all these different tours coming up. And they ultimately don't make their decision on where they're going to school until the following late summer/fall. So think about that for a second. They enter, and again, this is not the minority, this is the majority, right? Where they're starting to figure things out the following summer, following early fall, right, of their senior year. So they're spending 12 months because they think they have to have it all figured out this upcoming summer in June. They're spending 12 months stacking all this extra weight and expectation on their shoulders, only to really ultimately make their decision a year later. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but what I am saying is it's a sign that we do have the ability to take a step back, think about it, and actually enjoy the process that we're about to embark on. We don't have to have it all figured out because no one's going to be signing letters in, October of their junior year, in February of their junior year, in whatever, right? You have more time. So think about that. Now, let's talk about some tangible tips that we can start to do now, because I'm not saying it's not important. I do believe it is important to start the college rowing recruiting process and begin educating yourself on the landscape that's out there. So don't get me wrong, right? Just because I'm saying, hey, take a step back, take a deep breath, it is important to start to have a game plan, and especially for parents. Because guess what? I don't need to say guess what, because you know this better than I do. You're the ones who are going to be scheduling the campus tours, the visits this summer. You have all these different things that you're trying to juggle and manage, and vacations and all these things. So especially for the parents, you're going to want to have an idea today so that you can proactively think about, hey, what college tours are we setting up, right? So there is an importance to start to educate yourself on what's out there so that you can best utilize the summer off season, right, from school. So that's an important piece, right? So with that, what are actual steps or things that you can do today to help better educate you and better position you for once June rolls around and you're starting to think about the summer and getting started in the college recruiting process? So first one, and this is kind of athletes and parents, right? This is kind of a tag team that you guys can kind of start to have fun with more so, because I think that's what it is. But establishing your pillars, and your pillars are the criteria that you're going to be basing your college search off of, initially at least, basing your college search off of, that have nothing to do with rowing, have nothing to do with, am I rowing D1, D3, how fast do I need to be to go to this school, all these different things. So a couple of my favorite pillars, because it always starts with school first. That's a massive thing. It always starts with school first, because you don't know what can happen to your own athletic career, your own motivation to row, the rowing program, which we've seen in the past where some programs are discontinued. So you always want to start with the school first, right? Because an injury could happen and you could be sidelined for 6 months, and you want to know that that school is a place that you really truly want to be at. So that's where it starts. So the pillars that I like to start with, or that I like to recommend, are geographic location, proximity to a city / campus type, school size, and then academic field, right? Those are the pillars I like to start with. Notice how none of them had to do with rowing. None of them. So geographic location. Do I want Northeast with cold winters, but this is home for me? Or do I want to go across country to the West Coast? Am I someone who doesn't like the heat and doesn't really feel like rowing in 90 degrees in April? Okay, maybe the South isn't really where I want to go, so maybe I'm going to focus on the Midwest or up in the North, right? Geographic location is an important piece to think about. Proximity to a city. Do I want to be in a rural college town where the entire ecosystem is centered around the university, but there isn't a city within 5 hours of me? Or do I want to be in a true urban environment where there's a blend between college building, an office building, and streetlights on every corner? Or do I want something in the middle, a hybrid style campus, right? I'm 30 minutes out from a major city, but I have green grass and a fence around campus and feeling of community all centered around the university, right? Not that one is different than or better than the other, but they're just different. And those are things you want to think about. And you can learn a lot about that by going on school websites and just clicking around and being like, hey, like green grass, little courtyard, all these different things, right? Maybe this is a school I want to look at, or the opposite, right? So those are things that you can start to educate yourself on today. School size, that one's easy, right? 3,000 person campus. I might know someone in every single walk to class. 50,000 person campus. I may not see a friend for 3 days, but they have, state school football games that have 100,000 person stadiums and they're a blast to be at. Different tastes for different people, right? So school size. And then academics, right? If it's a school that doesn't have engineering and you want to focus on engineering, okay, that's an easy choice. If you want to go into some kind of medical field and that's not this school's priority, okay, easy, right? Easy ways to filter. So just by navigating your pillars, you're already doing a lot of the legwork that I think really sets the real groundwork that your search has to begin with. That has nothing to do with rowing, right? So start with the pillars. Number 2, education on the college rowing landscape. This is when you can start to begin to understand what is actually out there within college rowing. So Division 1, Division 3, D2, obviously, right? Club rowing programs, right? So I'm going to speak more in terms of Division 1 for now, right? Maybe some D3, right? But beginning to educate yourself on what are the options out there, right? If you're thinking about women's rowing, right? NCAA women's rowing, just at the D1 level, you have, I think, close to, if not over 100 schools to choose from, right? That's a lot of schools. If you are college looking for men's IRA rowing, it's actually probably a little bit smaller, right? It's 40 to 50 schools that support varsity men's rowing, whether that's at the D1 level or the D3 level. So starting to understand that. And the 2 best places I like to go to start to educate yourself, because that's really what it should be, right? It shouldn't be, hey, I know I can't row at this school because I have a friend who got recruited there and they were 720 on the erg and I'm 750, right? It shouldn't be about that yet, right? That's going to come later. But what you can do is start to go to Row 2K, check out the race results especially right now, right? We're in the middle of spring season, right? So what I always tell athletes is go on Row 2K, click on the results page, and every single week start to get an idea of what schools support women's rowing, men's rowing. Who are they racing? Who's racing each other? And you can start to educate yourself on what schools are out there. Another place I really love to go is Head of the Charles results. I've talked about this in the past, but Head of the Charles is probably the biggest regatta in the world for crossover for every college program, right? For at least a lot of them, right? I'm not going to say every college program. Some people don't go, but you can go back to the 2024 race results and look at, okay, on the men's side, who was racing in the Champ 8, who was racing in the College 8, who was racing in the Club 8, okay, what schools are around, what are the relative speeds of these schools, right? Just to educate yourself on what's out there. So race results are a big one, just to kind of get an idea of what schools offer rowing and what are the relative speeds. Instagram is probably my favorite, to be honest, because Instagram takes away really a lot of it's not necessarily about the results, but it's more about the personality of the program. Are they a team that's posting a lot and it's a lot of, just personality driven posts where, you're starting to get an understanding of this team's motivations or what they do from a community service project or a community service standpoint, or who are they racing this weekend? Did they actually travel for racing? What was their spring break training trip? Where was it, right? Did they go down to Florida? Did they stay local? You can really get an understanding of the personality, right? It's the coaches, are the coaches doing interviews? You can start to get an idea of a bit of the vision of the coaches when they start to do interviews and start to kind of express some of their own personality on social media. So I think race results are probably second. I think Instagram is really number 1 because that's where you can get an idea of the personality of the school, or sorry, of the program, right? Again, we're talking about the program. So education on the college rowing process, or on the college rowing landscape. Number 3, broad list of schools, right? So now you have your pillars and you're starting to get an idea of some of what's out there in college rowing. And then now, just for fun and also for a little bit of planning ahead for your summer, when you're probably going to be doing a lot of school visits because you're off from school, you have time, right? You guys can make trips and visit 3 or 4 schools at the same time. Creating a broad list of schools. Again, it's not about where your 2K score is today. It's not about, am I fast enough? Am I experienced enough? This and that. It's just about putting pen to paper and getting a list of 10 to 20 schools that fit your pillars and that support college rowing at the level that you are trying to row at, right? Division I programs, right? We use them as an example. I'm going to put 10 to 20 schools on a list that fit my pillars, right? The things that have nothing to do with rowing, and then that do support men's college rowing or women's college rowing, right? I'm going to get them on a list. And now this is my working table where I can dive into, okay, I'm following these teams on Instagram. I'm starting to educate myself. I'm going on their websites. I know the coaches' bios. I'm starting to kind of get an understanding of what's out there, right? So creating that broad list purely from an educational standpoint. Because guess what? It's going to change over time, right? You're going to visit a school in July and be like, hey, you know what? Big schools aren't really for me. I'm going to focus more on, schools between 2,000 and 5,000 students. Okay, 5 out, 5 in. Now I have a new list, right? So it's going to evolve over time, but at least you now have a starting point to base your search off of. Number 4, planning your summer, right? Planning and setting up tours, right? Because again, you could send every email in the world, fill out every questionnaire, 2 things we're going to talk about here in a second, and you may not get any responses, right? Coaches may not have taken the time to respond. They may not have even seen it come in because they're getting so many different emails. And primarily because, like we talked about before, they're still focusing on the rising seniors to fill out that class for the next fall. They're not focused on the rising juniors yet. So all the emails and questionnaires that you fill out may get responded to, may not, right? Especially, again, if it's pre or before June 15th, you're not going to get any responses, right? You can't. So even in the summer, your focus really should be on, hey, I'm taking a family trip up to Boston. And on my way, I'm going to visit these 5 schools from Philly to Boston and get, 5 schools or an understanding of 5 schools inside 3 days, right? So, okay, I'm going to start to plan that trip. So this is my broad list of schools that I just spent all this time figuring out. These are 5 schools that follow that path from Philly to Boston. I'm going to tour each one of them with my family on our way up to Boston to visit family, right? Whatever it may be. So that's just an example. Starting to plan ahead, because that's how you're going to really start to learn what you're actually looking for in a school, by visiting the campuses, by getting an understanding of big, small, building size, like all these different things, right? You can do a lot of that legwork in the summer. And then lastly, number 5, filling out questionnaires, creating a recruiting profile, and if you want, starting to draft an intro email, right? These are 3 things that, again, this is the first, after all those first 4 steps, this is the first one that actually has to do with direct communication with coaches. And again, the reason I put that at number 5 and not number 1 is because you want to have a genuine interest or genuine understanding of the school, of the program, of the coaches. You want to have a general understanding that this is something that you're truly interested in. To be honest, in my opinion, before you start wasting your time or the coach's time filling out 48 questionnaires and sending 75 emails to every single coach who has ever talked about rowing. You want to be a little bit more strategic with your time, but you also want to be strategic, or you want to be respectful of their time. So this is why this is number 5, filling out questionnaires, creating a recruiting profile, which in many ways probably could be closer to number, 1, 2, or 3, right? Because the recruiting profile, again, I don't think it gets you recruited, but what it does is it helps you get found, right? By some schools, right? I think if you're doing steps 1 through 4 correctly, you're going to have a pretty good idea of where you're trying to reach out to initially. But the recruiting profile kind of helps some schools land on you that you might not otherwise have thought of, right? So it is important, right? So you can put that one probably a little bit closer to 1, 2, or 3. And then drafting an intro email, right? Drafting an email so that once, hey, June 15th, July, maybe August, September, really, it's not going to make that big of a difference, but maybe that's when you're starting to send those emails. That's when you're starting to get in touch with these coaches. That's when you're, again, trying to maybe set up a couple phone calls, right? It doesn't have to be now in April and May because no one's going to respond. But June and then following up again in July and August, right? Depending on how your summer's going, what kind of updates you have, then you can start to send those emails out, right? So, hey, if you want to draft one now, right, and create a little email, right, a little kind of resume inside your email, then go for it, right? But when you start to prep to actually send that out, I would say send it to schools that genuinely fit your pillars, support the rowing that you're looking for, and you have a genuine interest in, right? And again, that's where that broad list is really helpful. That 10 to 20 schools that are on that initial list, right? So with that, long episode, long conversation, but again, those are kind of the 5 actionable steps that I think athletes can take today to better prep themselves for this summer. Creating your pillars, the things that have nothing to do with rowing, right? But that you want to center your search around. Education on the college rowing landscape, looking at race results every weekend, going on Instagram, following the teams, following the coaches, creating a broad list of schools based on numbers 1 and 2, right? So the 10 to 20 schools that you want to look at, right? And start to tour come this summer. Planning your summer, setting up some tours, number 4. And then number 5, filling out questionnaires, creating that recruiting profile, which again, you could probably do earlier, and then drafting an intro email that you're eventually going to want to send. But the last piece I'm going to leave with you with is coaches are not looking for a finished product as a sophomore/junior in high school. So any thought or disbelief or this or that of, hey, I'm 8'10" now, and I know that I have to be sub 740 on the erg in order to get a look from this school, you have no idea what's to come in the next 6 months. You have no idea what an amazing summer will do in changing your trajectory as an athlete. You have no idea what a confident junior year in the fall and entering the winter can do to increase your profile, right? Who you are as an athlete, who you are as a recruit in the eyes of college coaches. So don't throw all this expectation and all this weight on your shoulders, and also don't let it hinder your motivation to train and perform just because you get an email saying, hey, we're only looking for people under 739 or 740 and you're 8'10", right? You have time. Don't let that discourage you from creating a list, starting to send some emails, all these different things come the summer, right? You have time to get faster. You have time to develop and do it the right way. So again, these are actionable steps that have nothing to do with your speed relative to some of these programs. You're just trying to do a little bit of legwork to get an understanding of, hey, this is, now I'm getting the ball moving where I can maximize my summer and really feel like I'm in a position for success. With that, that's all I got. Long podcast. Hopefully it helps some people out there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Again, it's a fun process. Make it enjoyable. If you have questions, let us know. Stop me on the race course if you see me. I'll be walking around a lot of these championship races coming up. And that's all I got. Enjoy your day. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.